remember I had Google Fiber at my house. I was super excited, and I really did see it as game-changing for genetics. What used to take me like a week to transfer to my co-founder in LA, like a human genome, 200 gigabytes, would take like half an hour on Google Fiber. So it was just amazing. So in John's role as heading Google Fiber in Provo, I sent him some screenshots saying, this is so cool, when can I get it for business? And he's saying, we don't have small business yet. So I just thought, well, I'm going to share this story and just see what happens. And I put it on Medium. If you don't know Medium, it's kind of a cool blogging platform. But the thing is, if you put it on Medium, there's no guarantee that someone's going to see it. Especially now, it's getting harder and harder to be part of these collections. So I just put it out there, and it got picked up. I think I sent it to a couple people at Google who had sent it to their colleagues. It ended up on a couple Google blogs. It ended up referenced in like a Kansas City newspaper. And then fast forward to, I mean, it's got a few thousand views, and you can look at where they come from. Not huge, but it did serve its purpose in kind of pushing forward my plea to get Google Fiber for business, specifically for our business, downtown Provo, because a few weeks ago, Google Fiber, Google national kind of press team showed up with two Suburbans. They come to my house, they put makeup on me and sit me down in front of my computer, and they say, we want to do a case story. And I say, only if you get us Google Fiber faster for my business. And they said, we'll bump you up on the list. And so it was a little bit of quid pro quo and back and forth, but I am a big fan of, once you find that personal brand and personal competencies and what your mission is, put it out there, write about it, blog, get on social media, blog, tweet, whatever it takes to get yourself out there as heavily kind of invested in this area. So anyway, that's story number one. The title here is a little silly, but I didn't want to put like businessy talk or something boring. So I just thought, what can I intertwine into these entrepreneurship stories for you? And I remembered a few months ago I went to a retreat in Montana, put on by this group called Hero Partners, that is co-founded by Rob Ryan, who is a billionaire. In fact, he has, I think, one of the biggest tech acquisitions in history. He sold Ascend Communications for over $20 billion. And so when I was out there, it was this trout fishing retreat, and I say senator because Senator Bob Bennett was there as well. I just thought it was fun to add to the title. But all these quotes that I've thrown in here are from Rob Ryan, because he's such a brilliant entrepreneur and brilliant thinker that I thought it'd be a fun way to share some lessons learned, both from my journey and through these quotes of Rob Ryan. So he has this sunflower model, where the center of the sunflower, and you can read about this online, Rob Ryan sunflower model, where the center of the sunflower is your business's core competencies. What are you awesome at? What is your business best in the world at? And then the petals are your chosen verticals or products. And you go after one or two petals at a time and you nail them, meaning like 80% market share, whatever, however you define like dominating that vertical, nailing that product, and then you move on to the next. Sometimes you're raising funds for each petal, sometimes you're growing it organically. But when I was listening to Rob Ryan, I thought, that also applies to each of us. And we should look inside ourselves and see what our core competencies are, and think about this sunflower model, and then the stem is your assumptions underlying this model, and it can get a little shaky at times, so you should always check in on your assumptions and make sure this isn't kind of an unstable sunflower at risk of crashing down. So that's kind of the framework for this talk. Let's see if this pointer works. There's the sunflower. I think this is kind of similar to Jim Collins' Good to Great article, if you haven't read it, about the hedgehog concept. He talks about, it's based on this Greek parable that a fox versus a hedgehog. A fox knows a little bit about a lot of things, but a hedgehog knows one thing and knows it really well. And I like this as another way, as you're finding your way in the entrepreneurship world, what are you the best at? Or what do you want to be the best at? What's your passion? I mean, they just have to overlap, or why are you going to do it? You're not going to be having a whole lot of fun. And what drives your economic engine? I mean, if you're awesome at rollerblading and it's your passion, does it make you any money? Maybe not. So back to the drawing board and look at other things you're awesome at. And you'd be surprised, even the most creative artists out there can often find a niche where their talent and passion converges with a money-making opportunity, especially to today's world of Etsy and Society 6 and all these big cartel, these places that let, this maker's economy, let these people, these creative people, and in this world of building tech companies in a weekend, hackathon style, where you can throw up a WordPress site on a cheap host and throw in all these tools and your company is launched, and build a minimum viable product in weeks or less. So I found this thing last night as I was putting some slides together called visualize.me, I think it was. And it took my LinkedIn and it threw it on a pretty graph. So I figured this would be a way to kind of give some background of education and businesses, where I've come from. And so I went to BYU, studied neuroscience, and it took me a while to pick a major. I was all over the place, from business to sciences, back and forth, and everything in between. And finally, the neuroscience major popped up, and I thought, wow, the human brain is cool. This is kind of uncharted territory. I like research. I'm going to jump in. So I jumped in as the first cohort in that major. And but as I was in school, and it's funny, my dad teaches at BYU. He's on a mission right now, but he teaches organizational behavior, HR, and he's got this book that's BYU or someone is publishing for one of his classes on how to land your first job and building a stellar resume. His first chapter is, I think, on resume building, and he tells this semi-embarrassing story about me all the way from childhood through to college. But it's interesting, when I was in college, I decided I wanted to go to med school, and this is kind of about building your personal brand. I was there with 200 other pre-med students in that same year, and I wanted to go to the University of Utah, in-state tuition and local. I had kids already, little ones, but wanted to stick around. So I thought, how do I stand out from 200 pre-med students? Their grades are probably as good or better. MCAT scores, I mean, I can keep up, but I'm not going to be the best on that metric. So I thought, how do you stand out? And you look at what a med school wants. They want someone, I look at the University of Utah, I even ask them, so they want research, they want interesting extracurricular, they want kind of diverse experiences. So I jump in a research lab, get my hands wet with mouse studies, giving like medicines. We were doing full-on like mouse neurosurgery, infusing medicines into their brain, seeing if they gain weight, extracting the brain, looking at what genes were expressed up or down. Published a paper which is becoming more and more common in undergrad, but back then it was hard to pull off. But I would highly recommend it. Did join the honors program so I could have a thesis. So there's that compartment, maybe 10 hours a week for a year or two of research. Thought, okay, how do I stand out extracurricular? So I started doing some volunteer work. I flew to Guatemala with a friend, found some earthquake-ravaged hospital. We were undergrads. Volunteer just showed up. Can we volunteer in your ER? They're like, this is weird, but sure. And then, so we're like stitching people up before long, delivering babies. I even delivered a baby in a taxi in Guatemala, a taxi that shows up saying, help, outside the ER. Had all kinds of crazy, interesting experiences that became good stories for interviews and good formative experiences for me. back on the home front, that was just one trip. I started volunteering at the hospital, and then I was like, there's a lot of people doing that. So I started volunteering at the prison, the state prison, teaching life skills to inmates on death row. And I thought that was a cool, interesting experience. You know, whatever kind of shocks me and kind of blows my mind a bit, I think is going to be a good resume item as well, and also a great learning experience. So I did that, among other things, and then, you know, the UVU they take 100 people, but they only have about 20 spots from BYU, and so I was lucky enough to get one of them, but not without also calling in favors of people, as important of people I could to call and put in a good word, you know, everything I could think of to accomplish your goal. So that's undergrad to med school. When I got to med school, again, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I liked business. And I'll back up a bit and tell some undergrad business stories in a minute. But I thought, okay, how do I set myself up for a dual career of medicine and business? Well, there's an MBA school right down the hill. They didn't have an MD MBA, so I just said, well, I'm taking the GMAT. I go to the library on the weekends, take the GMAT, got a pretty decent score. I had taken a lot of multiple choice tests by now, so I just got a good enough score on the GMAT to get their attention and had this interesting story of a med student wants to do this program. They're like, sure. The interesting thing is, so I had the PMBA from 6 to 9 or 10, 3 days a week. I just walked down the hill from med school to business school and take those classes, and my credits per semester jumped up to like 45 or 50, and they didn't charge me extra tuition for the first year, and then afterwards they're like, wait, this guy is doing 2 degrees, and they started slapping on the 20 grand or whatever extra for the rest of the program. But you know, on the one hand, it got this done. I knew I wanted to get it done. I knew I wouldn't sacrifice a year of my career trajectory, already being an entrepreneur at heart, but going to med school is a long haul. So I wanted to cram it in, and I did, and had got my wife on board for, yeah, there'll be some, you know, some nights when I'm not there, but this is med school. I'll just take a little dip in my grades, get the business part filled in, and I think it'll work out. Has it been successful? I have no idea how to quantify in my personal trajectory if it's been good to have an MBA or not. It's certainly, I learned a lot. I feel like it's qualified me to jump into some of these roles and have more confidence in my own business skills, and certainly taught me how to read financial statements, and taught me some of the kind of the key mantras of business. My favorite class was a venture capital class, so I remember tearing apart kind of startups that are looking for funding in real-world examples and looking at term sheets, and it was just a lot of fun. I got to kind of see where my passion was in business, not just in healthcare. So rewinding a little bit to undergrad, I'd say, well, even before that, when I was in high school, it was pre-internet. I mean, the internet was there. The first time I ever dialed into it was probably on my mission in France from some like train connection system where you book train tickets, and there was like a way into email or something. I get back from my mission in 97, and like I remember landing, I lived in Toronto, and landing, and by the airport there were these weird things like Sony.com built into these bushes, and like or these on the side of the freeway or on billboards. It was just weird, like what is .com? I had no idea. And then I go home, and then my brothers run this thing that's just wild and crazy. But in high school, we did have modems and bulletin board systems that intrigued me. Even before that, my parents got this Texas Instruments computer. That was my first kind of magical moment with computers. I was like, whoa, this thing's insane. I went to the library, got a book of computer games, and there was one that was called like Alpiner. And I think it was several thousand lines of code I had to type in to the Texas Instruments computer, and then get it to, bam, there's this game, and you climb this guy up a mountain, there's this computer voice talking, and you avoid obstacles. It was just incredible. and then these bulletin board systems. It's funny, I guess the point of this story is they were looking for home pages. It was with ASCII, this ASCII art. And I was like, I like art. I'm kind of, you know, I sketched a lot, took a lot of art classes in college. So I started doing this ASCII art for these bulletin board systems, and then they'd mail me like cash in the mail. My parents were like, what the heck is going on? You know, you're getting these like $100 bills in the mail. They thought I was up to something pretty dodgy. But that was kind of my early taste of web design, and that brings me to college. Post-mission, there's this internet thing, and so I'm with my roommates in an apartment off campus, and thought, we want to start a business. This web thing's picking up. Let's start a web design business. We called it Graphica with a K. We set out and kind of pounded on some doors. I remember just knocking, cold calling on Von Losey Jewelers in Provo. I don't think it's here anymore. And we're like, yeah, do you need a website? And the old lady, Losey's like, you know, I've heard about these things, we probably do. Sure, let's do it. And just like, cuts a check and we make her a website. I had 2 roommates in IT majors. And then we landed the BYU Museum of Art as a client. So things were going really well. I had this friend in another part of campus who started a web design company at the same time. And I'm just telling this because it's an interesting story. His name was Brian Anderson, and he started his company he called USite. And he landed at the same time the BYU bookstore and got into e-commerce and dropped out of BYU and built this thing to a multi-million-dollar company and sold it, and springboarded him to some awesome stuff, including owning the Flash basketball team, and now he's producing movies. And his brother, incidentally, runs Startup Grind in the Bay Area, Derek Anderson. So another entrepreneurial family, but it was just interesting to compare notes. We're landing clients at the same time. We're going this kind of static page route. BYU Museum of Art, welcome. It looked pretty cool, but it didn't have this innovation in e-commerce that was happening. And so, and all of our roommates, they wanted to go work for Microsoft. I wanted to go to med school. We just shut it down and went. And that's okay, because that's the trajectory we were on. That's kind of the path that we had chosen. And it just reminded me of a quote by Rob Ryan, that you need to find out your passion, find out what drives your economic engine, find out what you're awesome at, and stick to it. And just like that hedgehog concept, when other things come up that pull you in a different direction, just say no. I mean, you evaluate every opportunity, every door, but if you want to nail something, you've got to stick to it and weather through all the distractions out there. So I talked about some of these. Another one, this is with my dad and with my dad, we had a friend in China who was in the tungsten and titanium and silver business. He's like, you guys know that these $500 rings that are in the jewelry stores here, I can make for $3 in China. And we're like, cool, let's do it. So we buy like $1,000 worth of them. We made this name and a website, and they get there. I put them in a fancy case. I go into a jewelry store. You know, my dad had a background in the jewelry industry, O.C. Tanner. So that was kind of where this came from. Me, nothing other than growing up with my dad. So I went into a jewelry store alone with this case of like 5 different styles, and I said, I see you've got some tungsten and titanium rings. Would you like to buy some wholesale? And they cost us like $3 a pop. And then the jewelry store owner's like, how much? I say, well, they're $80 wholesale. It's like, done, I'll take 5 of each. I was like, mind blown. Markups were amazing. And so we set off to try and make a business out of this. But it didn't really work. I mean, someone did buy it eventually. We recouped our inventory made a little bit of money, not worth the time and energy other than for the experience, but where it failed was in the sales force. That's when I learned that you can't just pick anyone to sell it. You can't just have someone trying to sell a million things. Oh, these are my kids, by the way. I tinker in Photoshop sometimes, but my twins and my 10-year-old. And a Rob Ryan quote that's kind of relevant. People have to believe in you, tell them, you know it's hard, but you think it will succeed. Some people will vote with their feet and leave at a send. Some said he's crazy, we'll triple our work, they didn't leave. I'd rather have less oars in the water, but all believers in the boat. Weed out people who aren't committed and don't believe. So what this kind of taught me is that you can't do a half-assed business on the side and make it awesome. So like you can't pretend to sell jewelry and a bunch of other things if you're a rep, or even build a business, or build 5 businesses at once, or be in college or grad school and building an awesome business at a rapid trajectory. And so you've got to jump all in. I know it's easier said than done, and I'll talk about some of my transitions when I jumped from academia to business full-time, but the other thing is when you pick partners and early employees, you've got to pick ones who are believers. You've got to find people who have passion, and that is something I've lived by in my past few businesses as kind of a rule, because you know, it's just so important, and it's worked out. It's paid off beautifully when I pick like the brightest and most dedicated co-founders I can, and then find the other believers, and then we just tag team it. It's amazing the synergies that pop out of a situation like that. At Tute Genomics, I haven't gotten to Tute yet, but just a few, I guess, words of background on Tute, and I'm jumping around college to present day and back and forth. But Tute, I founded 2 years ago, well, late 2012, with a guy by the name of Kai Wong. He's the smartest guy on the planet, I think. He is a computational biologist who wrote software that kind of pioneered the ability to analyze a human genome. What's been happening is we as society mapped the human genome over a decade ago. It cost $3 billion, announced in like 2000 in the White House with Francis Collins over the NIH. Craig Venter was this private maverick geneticist. They were racing to map the first genome. They did it together, under budget, under timeline, industry versus private, the world's biggest science project ever, done. So now what? This is opening a door for personalized medicine. Jim Watson of Watson & Crick gets his genome sequenced for $1 million. Steve Jobs, a few years ago, paid $100,000 to get his genome sequenced when he got cancer. And then last year, the $1,000 genome was announced, and that is thought to be the tipping point towards widespread adoption. So finally, we can sequence genomes of people with cancer, or babies in the ICU, or eventually everyone on the planet. Yes? What does that mean? So, good question. So, in all of the trillion cells in our body, we have a genome. And it's the same in pretty much all these cells, with the exception of cancer. Sometimes it'll go awry in a tumor. But it's all the same. And it's 6 billion letters, or 3 billion base pairs in this double helix, that makes you who you are. So you and I differ from about 4 million mutations or variants. We all differ in this kind of 1% of our genomes or so. But when you sequence a genome, you just take some cells, blood, saliva, wherever. I could get your genome off your water bottle as you leave the room and sequence it if I wanted to. So that's why privacy concerns are really interesting in like these Gattaca-style movies. It brings up interesting questions to think about. But so what we do is we read off those letters and see, compared to the reference genome that was announced in the White House, so map it to that and say, okay, that's the gold standard. Here's the 4 million places that this person is different. and you can see, should you take this medicine or this medicine? Should you pay more attention to blood clots or diabetes, or because you're at a high risk? Or when you have a disease, what type of cancer is it? So Angelina Jolie is a good example because she was in the news again recently about her genetic testing. The old way was you sequence 1 or 2 genes, you pay $4,000. So Angelina Jolie goes to her doctor. She pays $4,000 because her aunt had died of breast cancer. She says, I want to get tested. And that blood was sent to Myriad Genetics, $4,000 from her insurance. They read off 2 genes. There's 25,000 in your genome. And they told her, you have this mutation that puts you at an 80% chance of getting breast cancer, and this % chance of getting ovarian cancer, and talk it over with your doctor. And she made the difficult decision to choose beauty, to choose to be there for her children to choose to be there for her children over beauty, or what society calls beauty, and had a double mastectomy. And again, she went in for another surgery related to this. But fast forward to now, this genome revolution is starting because for $1,000 you can sequence all 25,000 genes, not just 2 genes. So what that does is it opens up a new door to look at all kinds of things, even from birth. The problem is it becomes a massive data challenge because you've got this 200 gigabyte file times everyone who walks through the hospital door, every human born on the planet, eventually, that we need to process through in a not just the computational challenges, but a meaningful way to make sense of that data and not over-interpret it and cause people to do anything drastic, but really interpret it in a careful and meaningful way to improve the health of individuals. Yeah.
So the essential benefit of this is to predict your future health.
So your genome can be used for a lot of different things. It can be used to make a genetic diagnosis. Like someone has, I'll give you an example. The new generation of doctors, there's a guy who went to med school at the same time as me, named Dr. Lincoln Nadal. He was recently hired by Intermountain in St. George as a cancer doc. And the first thing he does is he's like, I need a genome sequencer. He buys one, puts it in the hospital, and every patient who comes through the door gets like 50 genes sequenced. I mean, eventually it'll be every gene, but 50 genes sequenced, and of the tumor, and you can sequence the blood as well and compare. But what that is that's precision medicine. That's profiling a tumor and finding the right drug for the right patient at the right time. So that's like a big use of this, say, $20 billion genetics market. Half of it right now is in cancer. But a big chunk, maybe $5 billion, is in pediatrics. Like, if you think about, another example I like is the newborn ICU. I'm working with the Provo UVRMC to try and make this happen. We're working together to try and make it possible to sequence newborns in the ICU rapidly. Because there was a study done in at a children's hospital in another state called Children's Mercy that they showed that if you sequence a genome, even when it was $20,000, if you sequence it within, say, 48 hours, you can decrease costs immensely, but more importantly, save suffering, even save lives by getting to the answers quicker. Because of the babies in the ICU, the most expensive place to spend a night on the planet, a third of them have a genetic disease, but there are 5,000 possible genetic diseases. Yeah.
So you've brought up a couple of challenges with sequencing this genome. Is that where your business steps in to...
So, yeah, exactly. Our business isn't in the sequencing. There are companies like Illumina who, when we were in Boom Startup, they were worth $10 billion. Now they're worth $25 billion, their market cap. They won the $1,000 genome race. They sequence it. And then what do you do with this 6 billion letters, this pile of letters? We're a software company. Tute is a software company to go from that DNA to a diagnosis or treatment recommendation. You can personalize medicine or predict risk, just like you said. So there's multiple uses of the genome. But we come in from data to answers, but in a clinical way. If you've heard of 23andMe, they're a direct-to-consumer genetics company that doesn't look at the whole genome. They look at markers, and they used to tell you your health risks, but the FDA shut them down because it was direct-to-consumer. They didn't shut the company down. The company's doing quite well lately, striking pharma deals because they have amassed almost 1 million DNA samples and done these microchips looking at 1 million places in each genome, and pharma companies are wanting that data. So anyway, that's where we come in. So Tute was founded in 2012. We did Boom Startup in 2013. And I can get into a little bit about why we chose to do that. In fact, we'll just talk about it now because I thought it was an interesting experience. Having done businesses before, I didn't raise venture capital before this one. And the growth curve of those businesses was maybe not what you would want, especially in a hot market. I mean, mind you, we grew them pretty fast. I got these past businesses. I've had 3 acquisitions now. They've each gotten up to, I'd say, 1 to 3 million in revenue, and before they were bought. But they were also bought early stage or heavy on kind of some service oriented business, like one called Analinks. Here's Analinks. Was healthcare data analytics. We would take big hospital records, mine it for pharma companies so they could do virtual like clinical trials or see if a drug has side effects after it's on the market. That one was bought by the Bennett Group in 2012. Another one was a clinical trials site where we would do a lot of pediatric studies for pharma companies. Most recently, one that me and my brother had started was called Bully, in kind of doing evidence-based nutraceuticals and some interesting things, like we microencapsulated caffeine and put it in a pill so it would last 12 hours. I mean, it's kind of funny coming out of a couple of guys who came out of BYU where you couldn't even get caffeine on campus. But you look at the reviews on, I mean, there's a niche for this. The reviews on Amazon, if you look it up, are really touching, like some lady with chronic pain who says, this has changed my life. So we made these kind of innovative products. This was several years ago, but recently acquired, that I've been on the board with. So there's my twins again. And again, a quote about, it's better to have 3 people with titanium backbones than 10 people with spines of tissue paper. Again, entrepreneurship is hard work. It's, as a physician, I don't practice medicine anymore. I keep my license active, but comparing life, practicing medicine in a hospital versus running a business, there's no comparison. Entrepreneurship is all-consuming. It's in your blood. It's a 24/7 thing. The job is never done. Whereas, you know, in my past life, seeing patients, you could finish the day's work and move on. I mean, and that's one of the more busier jobs itself. So I'm running low on time here, but and there's my twins again. This is kind of funny. Just because I put this photo on the internet a few Sundays ago. It's been a number of weeks now, but I was sitting there with my twins who are 6 now, and they were intrigued by the concept of likes. And I got to be careful. As a psychiatrist, that's what I trained in. I want to be I want people to get less concerned about likes and number of views and everything else, but metrics are really interesting for business, like the number of views you get. So I was just kind of teaching them, it's a personal kind of curiosity of mine of how things go viral. So I had done some of these experiments before, so I put this on Reddit, and I said, as a parent of twins, identical twins, this is how we kept our sanity. And then we watched it climb. You can look it up on Reddit. There's like 2,000 comments, 5,000 upvotes, 1 million and some odd views of this photo. And then I go into work, a couple days later, I see people like looking at it, just not even knowing it was mine. It's pretty funny. I'll show you another example. Again, finding the believers. One point here is that you've got to think about why you're doing a business. So why do you want to be an entrepreneur? But even more importantly, why are you starting this business? Does it improve the world we live in some way? I mean, I don't care if it's an app or that's the silliest topic. You've just got to be passionate about it. It's got to be something that betters kind of the world we live in. You know, I'm not saying it has to be healthcare or, you know, something focused on, you know, geriatrics or nursing homes or cancer, but if you go into business for the wrong reasons, I just don't think it's going to work out well for you. I think if you're in it for the money alone or a quick exit, you're just, those motivations, everyone from your partners to your potential investors can see through that, and you just won't have the passion and the drive to weather the storms of entrepreneurship if you're not in it with your heart and for real reasons. So let's, this is kind of funny. One thing is, when you do start a business, you've got to be able to pitch it in like a minute or two or less in a very concise way. And I probably even failed at that today because I am just telling some stories about this genetic software company of ours, but you've got to nail the pitch. And there's a lot about relationship building. But I was going to fast forward to my brother's company. This is my brother, Jeremiah. He lives in Provo. He's a few years younger than I am. Went to BYU and was working a day job doing like QC, QA for a company. He didn't like it. He got fired and he's like, I can't go back to another one. It was like a temporary thing. They laid him off right before Christmas. He's like, that gave him the fire in his belly to start a business. So he started a supplement company and nailed it. And then his next business, he found that his core competency was social media marketing. Like he figured out how to sell a product with like a zero advertising budget. So he started his next company called Beloved Shirts that makes all over print shirts like with pizza on it, with pickles. And so I remember his wife, who's been very supportive. Like he had already nailed it in a business, had an awesome setup already. But when he went into this idea, she's like, that's crazy. You're going to sell pickle shirts? Like get back to reality. But he liked it, and he saw this growing demand for this individualized fashion to the point where he made these like pizza onesies that Katy Perry bought from him, Miley Cyrus, Cara Delevingne bought from him. There's me in a pizza cycling suit. There's my brother's kid. If you search Pizza Kid, it's another one that I put on Reddit for him and went viral. A couple million views in a day or two. Aziz posted it, 9gag, all these sites like posting it. Miley Cyrus posted it. All these people like, who is this kid? Or this is my future kid. And anyway, his niche, his core competency is in this crazy shock factor fashion and social media marketing, where he can just build up 100,000 followers on Instagram and sell it to them, and he does it, and it's doing really well. Obviously, with some of these clients. Anyway, another thing about focus, and then I'll stop, is be careful about the distractions out there. Having gone to college, and even college and med school in the pre-internet era for the most part, I can't imagine sitting there with all these buzzings and things going on, and I have to do that for myself, is shut off the email, close the tabs, turn off the internet, and just focus and get quality work done, get good ideas articulated, and push forward that mission of yours. So anyway, I'll stop there, and maybe there's time for a question or two.
Any questions? No?
Got 1 minute.
1 minute left? I'll ask, so can you kind of give a 30-second summary of Tute Genomics and what its software does?
So yeah, Tute is a cloud-based software platform for healthcare that brings you predictive, preventive, precision medicine through genomics that lets doctors and hospitals and researchers quickly go from DNA to diagnosis. We've raised about $5 million to date. We've landed some big publicly traded customers as clients. We are establishing partnerships with the sequencing manufacturers, with Google. We just donated a 9 billion record database to Google Genomics to further their academic research users in Google Cloud. So we're excited about where things are headed, because this is a genomics revolution that we're in, and I think we've come at it at an awesome time. So it's a blast.
Well, join me in thanking our